All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next panel this afternoon, and this panel is in connecting the dots between fragmented projects. And if you think about what IoT is all about connecting the dots between fragmented projects, and it's something that we obviously have not done enough of yet, but is the panacea, I think, for where we're going for the long haul. So quickly as an introduction, my name is Mike Krell. I am an analyst with Moor Insights Strategy. I'm the lead IoT analyst, which means I live and breathe hardware, software, sensors, microprocessors, wireless technologies, and pretty much everything in between. What I'd like to do is starting with Rhonda over on the right, go ahead and ask you to please introduce yourself, what you're doing here, what your role is in IoT, why are you sitting up here?
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm Rhonda Dirvin. I work for ARM, and if you're not familiar with us, we make microprocessor IP that goes into a lot of different devices, probably most notably is your phone. But we also go into a lot of the different sensors as well as up into the server space. So we don't make the silicon, so we make the microprocessor IP that's behind it. So you probably don't know a lot about us unless you're really into technology and phones. So I run the IoT verticals. So my team looks out at particular IoT verticals and tries to understand what we need to be providing for the market. And since we don't actually make the silicon, we're pretty far back. So we need to be looking out 2 to 3 to 5 years to make sure that we're feeding the requirements in. One of the reasons that I'm here is we recently announced that we have an NB-IoT radio that can be integrated into silicon. So it's a connectivity option that hopefully makes it easier for people to be able to connect into IoT. And so it's an area that I think is up and coming, and it's really interesting and exciting.
And I want to quickly ask you to clarify, because up on the announcement board over there, they've got board member OpenFog Consortium, which you did not mention. So you may want to talk about that one just briefly.
Thank you, Mike. So,
no problem.
Also, ARM is one of the founding members of the OpenFog Consortium. So this is a consortium that's trying to drive interoperable solutions between edge computing, if you will, in the cloud, and trying to take advantage of the computing, networking, and storage that's in between that's opening up with the new software-defined networking capabilities. So for us, it was important to do it in an interoperable way, which means working with other people and being completely open about that. So a reference architecture has been announced and is available, and we're working on interoperability, conformance testing, and turning it into a standard.
Great, thank you. John, you're up.
Hi, so my name is John Nye, and I head up business development and marketing for Senet. If you're not familiar with Senet, we are the first and probably fastest moving FCC certified LoRaWAN service provider, carrier, if you will, for low power WAN services. And so my sort of interest here is to kind of help evangelize the notion that for a huge percentage of the IoT marketplace, and particularly in the areas of agriculture and industrial applications, low power WAN services are really well suited for the types of applications that we see. At the same time, there's sort of no one size fits all in this market space, and I think as we sort of talk to this idea of connecting the dots, if you will, I do think that's important, and it talks to how a lot of these solutions will ultimately be brought to market. So,
you want to give it just 2 seconds on? Is everybody here familiar with LoRaWAN? Yes, no? I see nodding. Okay.
So the LoRaWAN, the LoRa Alliance is a group that we actually were one of the founding members of a few years back. It's now almost 500 members strong, and it's companies large and small that are very focused on delivering solutions now to support in support of the notion of long battery life, low power, essentially what represents probably more than half of the applications that will ultimately get deployed in the next sort of 5 years.
Thank you. I'll wrap back around to Rhonda's comment about NB-IoT, which has now been, I think, officially renamed LTE Cat NB1. I believe by 3GPP. It's a low power specification driven by 3GPP for IoT-based applications. It'll be being deployed over the next few years. So I just thought I'd wrap back that back around as well to make sure everybody was on the same wavelength.
So while you're thinking, Mike,
yep.
So one other thing to comment. So in case you guys thought that we were going to end up having an interesting battle up here, I have to say that we are actually a member of the LoRa Alliance and really completely agree with what John said, is that there's a lot of different places for different pieces of technology, and we're also big believers in LoRa.
Well, and I'm an analyst, so I can take either side of any quote. So if you want to argue, I'll be glad to argue any side of either equation if we need to do that. But I don't think that's the goal here today. So let's start off.
I like Rhonda.
Thank you, John.
I think I got left out of that one. I did, yes, purposely. Obviously, one of the tenets and one of, what I call the three pillars of, or the three legs of the stool for IoT is connectivity and connecting things up together. And I'm starting to see a lot of applications that are what I would call siloed, standalone kinds of things. And when you read the title of this particular presentation, which is Connecting the Dots Between Fragmented Projects, the first thing I thought about was the biggest issue that I see right now is that we're building silos and that nobody's looking at connecting up these silos together, which is really the major power of IoT. So, Rhonda, let's start out with you. Are you actually starting to see, and from your vantage point, the silos actually getting connected, or are you seeing still us in this standalone, do a little thing here scenario?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I thought about it because Mike and I had a chance to talk a little bit yesterday, and he did warn me he was going to ask me that question. And since then, I've been racking my brain for an example of when things are connected up together, and I couldn't come up with one. And so that doesn't mean it's not there, right? So maybe John has a one where they're connected, but we still are seeing silos. And I think one of the challenges is that, well, a couple challenges, but first of all, I think people have a particular problem, and when they want to solve that problem, they come up with a solution, and it's easier to come up with a solution to a particular problem, not thinking about how that necessarily could span or how that would morph over time. And so I think that that's where we are today, is that a lot of the siloed solutions have been deployed. And I think where we need to get to is what is that next thing, and how do we make them less fragmented. And I was over in the Smart Cities session beforehand, and I think Jay Boisseau said a really good thing, which is, a smart city is not necessarily these point solutions that are smart. It's all the different areas that can talk together and make the whole city really work well for its citizens, which means a lot more integration. He said it better than I'm saying it, but anyway, maybe John, maybe you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think I think the way I look at it from our sort of somewhat provincial view as a connectivity provider, the sort of first phase of our business is very much revolved around providing connectivity for vertical solution providers. So, companies that are in the water monitoring business or water metering business, companies that provide, smart trash bin products and services, and they are very much sort of point solutions that get sort of packaged up together with a set of dashboards and they use our network for connectivity. I think, but what's been very interesting for me, particularly in the last sort of few months, is that it is now starting to evolve, and as we see in the smart city space in particular, as we see some of these municipalities start to go beyond just this sort of brainstorming phase on what they might want to do, and start to further articulate plans and start to do POCs. There's proofs of concepts. There's absolutely going to be a requirement that there is sort of a common view and a set of connectors across a whole set of applications. And one of the key proof points that we're seeing that this is becoming real and important is that we've gone from having these vertical solution providers sort of line up behind us to more and more large systems integrators that are very horizontally focused, and they're trying to fill out their portfolios because in fact they're seeing demand, again, particularly from the smart building, smart city type of environment, that they actually have to be able to deliver across not just multiple applications, but multiple types of connectivity, not just LoRaWAN and LPWAN, but cellular and higher bandwidth services that require streaming. And so, to me, because having done a lot of channel development over the last 20 years, those types of, we're talking the big SIs and distributors, they don't enter market spaces until they have demand, right? They fulfill demand, they don't create it. And so the idea that that they're now actually starting to take action is an indicator that this problem is becoming more and more real, and as a consequence, they need to fix it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two key points that I think about in that scenario, which is, number one, most of the great smart city, integrated smart city things, and we keep coming back to smart cities because smart cities, to some extent, are easy to think about when you talk about integrating stuff, because there's lighting and there's parking and there's water meters and there's trash collection and there's police and there's fire and there Most of the municipalities I've seen have done really well at this are ones that don't have to deal with public funding. As somebody said to me the other day, it's good to be king. So when you go to Dubai, which is a perfect example, the integration of technologies in Dubai will knock your socks off, but that's because somebody said, here's a pile of money. They didn't have to go out to the public and raise funds to try and integrate all this scenario. So that's number one and what I've seen there. But what I really want to explore a little bit further is the SI channel and the system integrators and the system bars and what role those guys are going to play in this scenario, because I've been pontificating for a long time that he with the biggest channel, system integrator and VAR channel, is going to be the winner in the long haul, because the big enterprise customers in across energy, across ag, across all enterprises, those are the guys who are going to have to stitch all this stuff together because they've already been stitching it together. Rhonda, is that what you agree with that? Is that what you see as well?
We see the system integrators as being a really important piece of the puzzle, because I think especially in cities, but in a lot of the different verticals, a lot of the people that have the problems that want to install the technology solutions don't have a lot of experience in that. So you get outside of manufacturing, and most of the people that have the problems are not technology people, right? So they don't know how to choose a vendor, and they don't know how to put things together, and there's a lot that they don't know. So they'll rely on a system integrator to pull it together and to guarantee that it'll work and solve the problem. So I think that is a really critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think the other part of the equation, as you brought up, is that the SIs don't get $90,000 is not interest in SI. Okay, $9 million makes an interest in SI, and so are you seeing an advancement? John, are you seeing an advancement now from POCs, proof of concepts, which are not really all that interesting to an SI, to projects that are actually going to monetize? Are you seeing them getting engaged on projects that are big enough for them to get excited?
Yeah, and yes, the answer is yes, but it is. I would also tell you that it is still in the early stages. So in other words, there's been a fair amount of experimentation, proofs of concept, RFPs, RFIs, particularly at a municipality level where I'm based in the Boston area. The city of Boston recently put out an RFI. And you could tell, via the content that they're still struggling. They're still trying to figure out exactly what to do and how to do it. And so they were quite hungry for companies like us to bring forward a set of ideas. I think what the SIs are doing now is trying to make sure that their line cards, because they get involved in these RFIs and RFPs, frankly, they see more of them than we do, and so they're trying to make sure that they have a full solution, including connectivity, right? Because it's a critical piece, but sometimes it's an afterthought as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the Smart Cities conferences I went to, there was the CIO from Chicago was there, and they were saying they were tired of proof of concepts, because a lot of times the people would put together a proof of concept, but it wasn't a saleable product. So they wanted something that they were calling pilots, right? So it was something that they had to be able to buy at the end of it. So it's one thing to put solution and technology together just to show that you can. And then she said it was just a big waste of their time to be able to not turn around and say, okay, now we want 4,000 of those and we want them implemented here. So just to throw that out there, I thought that was kind of interesting that there's more of an appetite for, I don't want to see something that just can work. I need to be able to buy it.
I think that's a very valid point, and because there is a next phase that is happening now, which is, I don't want to do these tests, whether you call them pilots or proof of concept. I don't want to do these with things that are still essentially alpha or beta products and solutions. They actually, at the back end of it, they want to be able to purchase it and deploy it, right? And we are seeing that.
So, just thinking about this, then, do you think as we get to these pilot programs, since we have a hard time, and we've talked numerous times this week about soft ROI and hard ROI, okay? Is it actually easier to see hard ROI in a pilot kind of program as opposed to in a, because that's one of the things you got to look at, right? If you run a pilot or you run a POC, you got to actually look at it and say, did I get a return on this investment? Or did I save money? Or did I, X, Y, Z? Can you actually judge that from these projects that we're doing?
The answer is, in my view, and from what I'm seeing, the answer is it depends. Right?
That's a definitive.
And well, but here's the thing, right? And we see this when we talk to particularly urban governments, that yes, they are interested in ROI, and yes, there does have to be a commercial model, but sometimes if you lean too hard on that, because I think all of us that are in the IoT business, there is great ROI to be found in whether it's a vertical or a horizontal solution, right? There is great ROI to be found, whether it be reducing truck rolls on an application or whatever it might be. That's not really an issue. A lot of times when it's tied to a smart city program, they're looking for how are you going to, maybe it's a soft R, how are you going to improve the quality of life for our citizens, right? What are you going to do to improve air quality? What are you going to do to reduce waste and improve sustainability on key resources like water, for example? Those become part of the dialogue, and I think certainly, for the politicians that are sort of driving these projects, equally important to ROI.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think a lot of times the ROI work is done on paper up front, and then the technology piece is, does it work and can it implement what we think it can? And so if you get that match, right, the technology piece matches the paper that you did, then the plan is proven, right? So they can go ahead and purchase. Yeah,
and I certainly think that there are certain areas where, as we all know, is easier to see the ROI than not. Right, process improvement and manufacturing lines have been running, for a really long time and gathering data for a really long time, and people have been optimizing lines and that kind of thing for a long time, and you can kind of look at it and see and say, is this doing better than it was doing before? Right, even if you can't get to the exact measurements at that particular point in time. It's I think it's a lot of these new areas and new spaces that are still trying to figure it out. And again, we keep coming back to smart city, but in here we're talking a lot about ag, and we're talking about, energy and that kind of thing. And in those spaces, a lot of this is new, but you can certainly see, and from the last panel that we had up there, it's like, this is pretty critical stuff to be able to know and see that the waters are rising and people should not be on their road driving a car right now. Okay.
And there's another there's another piece of this, which is sometimes sort of the civic good, if you will, and things like sustainability actually do go hand in hand with ROI. If we look at some of our partners that are, for example, in the water metering business, right? There's massive amounts of what's described as non-revenue water, right? And so having a network in place and sensors in place that actually help you monitor, manage, control, and resolve that set of issues, not only is it good citizenship from an environmental and a sustainability perspective, but it also ultimately helps the utility to improve their own bottom line.
Yeah. Rhonda, you have something to add to that? No? Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. I want to see, is there anybody in the audience that has a question? Otherwise, I'll fill in some time with a couple more questions. Is there anybody out there who's got anything burning they'd like to ask?
Or if you want to talk about something else. It's not a lot.
No? So then, put on your magic, your magician's hat, your prognostication hat, which is what I have to do every day. Now it's my turn to put you on the spot because I'm asking the questions and you're sitting in those chairs. So what moves us forward? What gets us off the dime? What are the one or two things that you think are most critical for now? I mean, in 2017 to happen to get us moving forward.
So I'll start if that's okay, and just to clarify your question, if you assume this is to defragment and to have more things be able to work together, I think one of the key areas that we haven't talked about here is data, right? So a lot of the things that make it harder is that data is in different formats and different, right, with different levels of correctness, if you will. So to be able to have these things work together and run analytics on more than one set of data points, I think the data and resolving the data, and especially in a city where who's going to pay to keep that data up to date, because cities don't like to take ongoing expenses with no known revenue. I think the whole data problem is something that is being addressed, but it's a little bit slow, and it's something that we really need to put priority on and get moving on, I think, to help defragment some of this.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what you said, but I'll sort of take it back to the question and how we look at it from a go-to-market perspective as well, right? So we talked about the notion that, there is this emerging systems integration channel that seems to be becoming more and more interested and more relevant in terms of what we're doing. Senet as a connectivity provider, network provider, we're ready now, right? So we have LPWAN services that are deployed across the country. We're building that network both on a proactive basis as well as in partnership with our customers. But it behooves us, all of us who are participating, to make it as easy as we possibly can. And so one of the things I've been doing at this event is talking to our partners who are in the gateway business, the base station business, and our platform partners, and looking at ways that we can help package these solutions in such a way that a big SI can actually take advantage of it and deliver solutions in the marketplace, right? And because, the other lesson learned over the past 20 years is that they don't do that on their own necessarily. Sometimes there's certainly, outlier cases where they do and they will, but more often than not, it's in the interest of us as the sort of suppliers into that set of channels to make it easy for them. Because at the end of the day, as we've already discussed, if you're going into a city or a local government that's just looking to figure out how they can deliver value to their community through IoT, they don't know what they don't know, and they are going to be dependent upon these sorts of partner arrangements, and those partners have to be well equipped to be able to communicate that in a clear way, and then obviously folks like ourselves are really part of the delivery mechanism for that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We are right on time, so I'm going to call us to a halt, which is wonderful. I'd like to thank both of our panel members for joining us today and for all the time that they put in. So thank you, both of you, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for being in the audience, and we're going to switch over here to our next presentation, which is on IoT solutions in rapid transit. So we'll be starting that